Hello, welcome to another edition of the Willie Bragg Show. I'm your host, Willie Bragg. Today, I hope each and every one of you are doing well. I was going to do this stream last night, but I as you remember, I was like really out of it with my stream yesterday afternoon, not getting a whole lot of sleep. So I needed to get a lot of sleep and get that out of the way. So that's everything should be better, even tech-wise today. Everything should be better. I don't know what the hell happened with it, with my computer, or was it the internet yesterday? But it was just everything was just kind of a flub and a clusterfuck. Sorry about that. I'll try to be more professional. So anyhow, I see here on the chat line, I see that we have Desert Mantis was here last night. Said, "Dang, I'm a day early." Well, if you can show up or watch the video later on, glad to have you on board whenever you can get here. Miguel is here. How are you doing today, Miguel? Always great seeing you here as well. So I'm going to do my video right now on Cenk Uygur and Briahna Joy Gray. Cenk Uygur was on the Bad Faith podcast just a few days ago with Briahna Joy Gray, she and Cenk kind of duked it out, and it was called Debate. Can the left finally unite with Cenk Uygur? And they've had a kind of a contentious relationship in this left space for quite a while, that everybody knows. There seems to be a whole lot of that around. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play the video and show you my take in any points that needs to be addressed. So that's what I'm about to do right now. And if you see me walking away, I just got a new air conditioning, central heating and air unit, and I'm trying to work the bugs out of it, and I don't have time to work the bugs out of it right now, so I'm going to grab a conventional fan and have that blowing at me. The weather is changing already, and I am not happy about it. So anyhow, we'll get started right now. Let me go ahead. As I said, when you see me pop away out of my seat, I'm coming right back in a second. So we're going to get started with the Bad Faith podcast with Briahna Joy Gray having Cenk Uygur as the guest. So sit back, relax, and we'll get everything going.
Jay, and now you're taking offense at the slightest thing I said because I disagree with your tactic. You have to deal with objective reality.
All right, Cenk. When you start out as an outsider like me, you start out with a giant obstacle to overcome.
This is the most irrelevant debate of all time.
Well, I would love to move on. No, you made him the face of the movement.
No, I didn't. Briahna, so I'm the driving force behind challenge the establishment, okay?
Oh, my goodness
and then Jimmy starts joking around about looking up my co-host's skirt and how cool it was and how funny it was.
They would have all started saying, well, look at her, thinking she could do this? What an arrogant person.
Of course, Cenk, but we all know that, right?
Please, all of us, to the best of your abilities, let's get beyond it. Let's go back to unify, and let's try to do something productive.
That's right. That's 100% right. I'm so glad to have on Bad Faith for the first time Cenk Uygur, who, of course, you all know is the founder of the Young Turks, probably the most successful and most watched left media outlet on the internet. Welcome to Bad Faith.
Thank you, Briahna. I appreciate it. And it's good to be on here.
Now, Cenk, I introduced you as, a founder of Young Turks, but you're also recently ending a presidential bid. I regret that we didn't talk to you while it was still ongoing. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about it now and get your perspective on who the remaining left candidates are and how you think the left should be looking at how to use their vote going forward from this place. But let's start with your own campaign. Obviously, I think the kind of top end news item that people were focusing on was your eligibility having not been born in the United States of America. Do you think that subsumed too much of the coverage and kind of undermined an ability to run a sort of a message campaign?
100%. But there's also giant irony in it, which is that it kind of subsumed the campaign to the point where we had much more trouble raising money, getting in the media, all the things that we needed to run a real campaign, right? But at the same time, we didn't get any credit for doing something interesting and pursuing a civil rights matter. So we didn't get any coverage from it either. So it wound up being a worst of all worlds. Because I think that if I was in a slightly different situation, let's say that I was Jennifer Granholm, so someone who was a secretary of cabinet and very respected, born in Canada, et cetera, and I decided to run for president, my guess is that hey, first naturalized citizen to run for president would have, if it was someone that had status privileged position, would have been taking so much more seriously. It would have been considered wow, that's a beautiful, great, amazing thing that this person is doing. Whereas I got, he's not eligible, so we hate him twice as much, / will completely ignore him. And
let me just start off by saying this. Is Cenk Uygur ideologically better than Joe Biden? Absolutely, yes. Obviously. And I don't even like Cenk Uygur. Is he better than Marianne Williamson that was running in the primaries? He campaigned on a public option. Even Dean Phillips, who's terrible on a host of issues, his position on healthcare, if he's sincere about it, it's better than Cenk Uygur's. In fact, Cenk Uygur should be ashamed of himself for not proposing Medicare for all. I just want to get that out of the window, get that out of the way. We can have a debate about whether Cenk is qualified or not due to his status of being born in Turkey. I don't care if it's Turkey or Canada or what have you. It's not an issue because the policies are the issue. You, Cenk Uygur, ran to the right of Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips, which is pretty damn unacceptable considering the position you hold in social media. You should actually be campaigning to their left, but you didn't.
And so it just became impossible to recover from that. And, many other things happened in the campaign, and I think a lot of positive things happened. But in terms of ability to succeed on some of the core issues, that really hurt us beyond our ability to recover.
Yeah, I mean, that feels right. And I understand why that's frustrating. I completely agree with you that the kind of civil rights case that you were making is an important one. I think many people who've listened to this podcast have hopped into the comments on Patreon or elsewhere and said after a Shama Sawant interview, for instance, oh gosh, I wish she could be president. And there are a lot of folks over the years, Arnold Schwarzenegger on the right, people were desperate for him to be able to run for president, who for various reasons, sparked the imagination, compelled people to start to try to investigate whether or not this was possible. But I think you're right. When you're already running kind of an insurgent outsider campaign, something like eligibility requirement is going to potentially have the effect of derailing the effort entirely and preventing people from looking to you with the amount of seriousness that's required to get off the ground in the first place, which I would say is not just an issue with your campaign. It does seem to be something that's causing a lot of these left efforts to flag. And I think pivot to what's going on with the Cornel West campaign, where it does feel like the pivots between launching with the Movement for a People's Party, then going to the Green Party, and then going independent, I think caused some folks who were pretty ready to get on board to have some hesitation about whether or not they wanted to throw their own money behind that project. What's your read?
Yeah, so there's a good overlap between the naturalized citizen issue and the left overall and our chances. So the second thing I would have said about the naturalized citizen issue is that if I was running on the Republican side, then I think that I could have been a Democratic hero, ironically. Like, if you run as a Democrat, they hate you. But if I ran as a Republican challenging Trump, saying the same exact things that I was saying about Trump, but I was on the Republican side and pursuing a civil rights case exactly as I was, I think mainstream media would have looked very kindly on me. That would have been like, whoa, okay. And then a lot of civil rights groups would have probably rallied to my cause. But what you don't see, and hence now the overlap in the two subjects, is how much power the Democratic Party has and how censorious they are and how punitive they are. So that's behind the scenes, and only a few people like myself, Marianne Williamson, Cornel West, et cetera, have seen it. And so, for example,
let me just say this. We know how terrible the Democratic Party is. I mean, Cenk, you're not exactly shocking anybody by being a truth teller. We saw what happened to Bernie Sanders in 2016 and in 2020. We saw what happened. In spite of me being bummed about the fact that Tulsi Gabbard could be Donald Trump's running mate, it would just kind of confirm a lot of things that some of the Tulsi critics, ranging from the left to the shitlibs to the centrists, have been warning me about her. She's even been done an injustice, and I kind of blame Hillary Clinton people around her and Hillary Clinton herself from pushing Tulsi to the right. And I still think that Tulsi is a better person than Hillary, but that's another issue and another subject. But yes, Cenk, and you sit there and you are committed to working inside the Democratic Party, because it's great what you say about Joe Biden. Everything you say about Joe Biden is 100% true. But here's the problem with Cenk. Now that he dropped out and he's suspending his campaign, and he's still kind of talking a little bit of junk about well-deserved junk about Joe Biden. The thing is that if Biden is he's the presumptive nominee, but you never know, since his brain is rotting like a vegetable, that he may step down. But assuming that Joe Biden is the nominee and he's campaigning, you better bet your Beetle boots that Cenk Uygur will be like, it's imperative that we go and vote for Joe Biden or the sky could fall because of Orange Man. Well, I'm not going to celebrate if Orange Man wins, but I don't know if I could call it a celebration if Joe Biden is reelected either. I mean, I hate this election. I hate what got to go through with this election. I mean, the optimism that even when Bernie dropped out, there was still some optimism because maybe at that time, maybe Bernie, I thought, could have made some kind of an impact where there would have been maybe a little bit of a better direction for Biden if he would have won. But Biden did next to nothing. So in a lot of ways, I'm looking less forward to the 2024 election because it's going to be part 2 of Biden and Trump, for starters. And the optimism I had with Cornel West have been quickly dashed away because, you know, the Clinton people, in my opinion, put Peter Dow in the Cornel West campaign to destroy the campaign from within. So, and that is what I believe happened. And boy, oh boy, did they pull a number, and they really did play on Cornel West, and his campaign is tremendously weakened as a result. We'll continue.
I would book events ranging from small things like a speech at Bennington College of Vermont or Texas Tech, because I was on the ballot in Vermont and Texas, and they would get canceled a couple of days before the event. And it happened in every instance, in every situation that you could imagine. So I got booked on CNN, canceled. Booked on Jesse Waters' Fox News channel, canceled. Vermont Progressive Caucus, canceled. Arab American Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, canceled. And so if you're wondering why are these all getting canceled, that's because you've never run against a Democratic incumbent.
Okay, Cenk, this is why, as I remember you and Jimmy Dore butted heads over this, and Jimmy Dore butted heads with Sam Cedar over this. This is why the two-party system you can't reform the two-party system. I used to think that you could do the inside-outside shit. You know, I used to think, well, I can go and vote Green Party, but, you know, consider AOC as one of my own. I could consider the other members of the squad and people like Rokana, who's adjacent to the squad, as one of my own. There are Democrats who are fighting the good fight against the right wing that dominates the party. I used to think that. But even though they may have good intentions, the Democratic Party machine crush Bernie Sanders. They crush AOC. They crush anybody that may have actually tried to make a difference. And to the point where, you know, they're trying to say, well, we could do this and this and that and this and this and that and get these little tiny little crumbs of reforms. And the problem with the tiny little crumbs of reform is that the left tends to be too grateful for that. You should want the whole goddamn feast, not the crumbs on the table. So, you know, as far as the Democratic Party, it's easy. When it comes to the Republicans, it's easy. I mean, you know, I will never vote Republican, and make that clear. There's not a fucking policy situation that the Republicans can come up with that'll be like, oh, I like their basic program. Well, the Democratic Party, at best, they may promise a lot of shit, but when it comes right down to it, they'll find a way to squirm their way out of this. So, yeah, I mean, I've already in my own way tried the wrecking ball against the Republicans, but you also have to apply it to the Democrats too. And this is not fantasy world talk. This is actual real life politics that I'm spouting right here.
And they have tremendous power behind the scenes, because it's not just that they call the Arab American Museum or Bennington College and say, drop them. It's not Joe Biden on the phone. Of course not, right? But it is a groupthink that anyone running against Biden is a heretic of the most extreme variety and must be punished and must never get a vote. The most important thing is do not let them out of the box, okay? And I think that Marianne suffered this more than any of the candidates, including myself. And so that's point one. Point two is, this is another one that's very uncomfortable for people, but important for you to know. A lot of Democratic politicians huff and puff and look like they're challenging Biden, but behind the scenes, they're not challenging Biden at all. In fact, they're trying to help him. And so, for example, and this is another topic we can get into.
Yeah, Cenk, you'll be helping them too in a few months. I will be looking at the Young Turks, listening to you and Anna. I got problems with Anna, but Anna is certainly Ms. Birthing person herself seems to be grifting into playing the role of Jimmy Dore now that Jimmy Dore's gone, even though she hates the guy. But she's definitely more critical of Jimmy Dore than you are, Cenk. I mean, it's all theater. I mean, I do believe that you wish the Democratic Party could be further left. I do believe that. But at the same time, you want the TYT network to be basically just another CNN, another Fox, another MSNBC. I mean, and I'm not faulting you for having that kind of a vision, but that took priority over what your core politics was supposed to be.
The uncommitted delegates, because they did win delegates, go to Joe Biden. So that's not an accident. That's actually on purpose.
How is that possible? My understanding was that, you know, there's obviously this discussion partly spurred by Ezra Klein's piece from a couple of weeks ago about whether or not there's going to be a convention fight. And my understanding was that those delegates in the context of those fights would have to be won by whoever emerges as Biden's heir apparent.
Yeah. So my understanding right now is that since uncommitted is a word, which honestly was like, I get some of the strategy behind it, but at a minimum after Michigan, they should have pivoted hard because as things stand now, since it's just a word, it goes to whoever the candidate is. And that's the leading candidate is Joe Biden. It definitely does not go to anyone else. Definitely. And no one has leverage over it. No one can control it. Who can raise their hand and go, I am uncommitted? I mean, Rashida Tlaib can't do it. Nobody can do it. It's not a thing. So, and I have heard from allies in the Arab and Muslim American community, et cetera, that I was a bridge too far. That even though I could argue, and I think probably a lot of people, even haters of mine, would probably agree, I don't know that there was anyone defending Palestinians with the kind of fervor that I was in American media, let alone international media. Now, but at the same time, they thought I'm a bridge too far, and it could hurt their careers in the Democratic Party.
Well, what do you mean by that? What do you think it was about you that might cause them to believe you were a bridge too far, in your words?
Easy. I don't kiss Joe Biden's ass, and I don't mean that in like some like.
But do you think that Marianne and Cornel West? I mean, I know that some of my listeners are going to say yes.
No.
I think Cornel West too. But I mean, comparatively, there are other folks in the mix who've been critical of Joe Biden. No. Yeah,
I'm glad you're asking for the clarification. No, they are equally a bridge too far. They're not. There's the same exact phenomenon for Marianne and Cornel, etc. So
he doesn't kiss Joe Biden's ass. Cenk Uygur is going to be so infected with the special strain of Trump derangement syndrome that you better bet that Cenk Uygur, I'm saying this figuratively to make a point, that Cenk Uygur's tongue will be wiggling up Joe Biden's rectum, hoping for a win.
So it's not like, oh, I'm, more of a bridge too far than they are. It's just that if you're actually saying things that are not complimentary of Joe Biden, and in fact, you could see with your own eyes. When Dean Phillips, a U.S. congressman, got in the race, there was grumblings, but in the beginning, he was saying very complimentary things about Joe Biden. So he was invited on CNN many, many, many times, and he was still an acceptable figure. The minute he started criticizing Joe Biden more aggressively after we were all banned from the Florida primary ballot, then he became persona non grata. And then
Dean Phillips, as I said, rhetorically is actually better than Cenk Uygur. Not by a whole lot, but in the presidential primary, what is a presidential primary on a host of policy issues? Not every policy issues. Probably Cenk is better on Palestine than Dean Phillips, obviously, for obvious reasons. But Dean Phillips, what is this guy? He's basically a poor man's younger Howard Dean. That's all he is. He's a poor man, younger Howard Dean. So I'm not even taking too much stock in Dean Phillips either.
He became a radical, and poor Dean Phillips has lost his mind, and you can't support Dean Phillips, otherwise you're betraying the Democratic Party. And I mean, you can go back and read the articles pre and post, and you will see an enormous difference. And we saw that day to day.
So I think there's something to that, but I'm really interested in getting back to the core of this, just what seems to be a strategic consideration around Uncommitted, which is whether or not they should have pivoted to a person, because this is, of course, is something that I think has crossed a lot of our minds. When we see the numbers that Uncommitted is able to put up compared to the numbers that other left candidates have been able to put up, or people who are not participating in the primary, obviously Cornel West. But I think many of us wonder why is it that Uncommitted can get 100,000 votes in Michigan or get 30% of the vote in Hawaii, get into the teens in, what was it, North Carolina, when these left candidates have struggled so mightily? And was there any effort to try to link up, assuming that you're a candidate who's ideologically aligned on Palestine, which...
I'll tell you why, Briahna, is because the fucking Democratic Party in 2020, and I'm laughing at the Democrats now, so didn't want Bernie Sanders to the point that they had a vegetable that became the nominee instead after Obama made a few phone calls. I know that you know that, but that's basically what it comes down to.
Which, maybe you were, Marianne has had her criticisms with respect to her stance on Gaza, although of course she does support a ceasefire. I don't know what the limits of the uncommitted sort of argument are, but was there any effort between you or, to your knowledge, Marianne, or any other campaign to try to say, well, we should just rally behind a person as opposed to a word?
Yeah, 100%. I did. And I called all the Muslim leaders I could think of and reached out to them. And they had a lot of positive words. Keep going, brother. We love you, brother. You're doing really important work, brother. And no. So
what did they say to you? Like, what is it to say, well, as every candidate does, there's some baggage that we don't want to be, connected with, or is there a policy point that we don't want to entangle ourselves with? What was it?
Yeah, so it's a combination of factors. So number one, when you run as an outsider, again, me, Marianne, and even of all people, Dean Phillips, the minute he started criticizing Joe Biden, you become persona non grata in a way that goes way beyond the establishment. It actually seeps into even your own allies and the progressive movement. Why?
You forgot to mention RFK, and I don't like RFK, to tell you the truth, but he could be lumped in with you, Cenk, and Marianne Williamson, and Dean Phillips. And he has, as much as I don't like RFK Jr., he probably was the most consistent person around because he finally got it. I'm being fucked with in the Democratic primaries. I'm running as a third-party candidate. This does not mean I like RFK. On the policies, yeah, Dean Phillips is better. You're better, Cenk, and Marianne Williams is better than RFK on most issues. I'm not going to dispute that. Some areas where I can't stand RFK. But RFK had the foresight to realize, man, I'm being screwed over by the Democratic Party. If we have more people like that, when they realize I can't take this abuse anymore, we're talking about the Democrat. We're talking about America, somebody who's part of America's Camelot, exiting out of the Democratic Party. Who would have ever thunk it that a Kennedy would exit out of the Democratic Party? And that's exactly what happened. Now, can it be that he will return back to the Democratic Party after the election? Possibly. Maybe even fairly likely. But tactically speaking, as much as I don't like RFK, he ironically gets a little more respect than the rest of you guys that just sit there and be like, whoa, me, why does the Democratic Party, why do they go and screwed us over? Because it's the fucking Democratic Party.
Because mainstream media smears you so thoroughly that people don't know it's not true and they can't get it out of their heads. So, for example, one of the concerns that the Muslim community had, and these are all small, they're not determinative, it's a collection of things, okay, was, hey, is Cenk sufficiently pro-Muslim? And you would think like, well, that's the most insane question I've ever heard. I'm born Muslim, my whole family's Muslim. No one defends Muslim Americans or Muslims across the world in American media, arguably more than me, or if they do, it's a tie, right? So why would they even question that? Because they read from the New York Times the last time I ran for Congress that I was anti-Muslim. The New York Times just stated it as it was a fact and never clarified that I am actually born Muslim.
Why would they write that?
They wrote it because once an outsider runs, a smear factory begins. So that particular smear came from...
But of all the ways to smear you, I would expect, I'm not trying to awfulize here, but I would expect the usual slight that Muslims get is that they are anti-Semitic, for instance. It's something that a lot of us who've been defending Palestine on the left have been hit with. It seems bizarre to go out of your way to accuse a Muslim person of being, I don't know. I have been accused of being anti-Black. So I don't know.
So, Briahna, I can explain all that because I lived it.
Sure.
And so at the time, if you remember, I'm running in 2020 and Bernie endorses me. The minute that Bernie endorsed me, and it was right before Super Tuesday, so it was at a critical time that they're trying to take down Bernie Sanders by any means necessary.
I remember.
So when he endorses me, they do a quick and dirty check of all of the dirty talking points against me. And then they put it up without double checking at all, let alone maybe sometimes actively on purpose doing it. So I can say that with confidence because the New York Times had to retract parts of their article about me because other journalists were shocked at the level of lying. And it's not exaggeration. They had to retract it. It's on the record. One of the things that they did, Briahna, speaking of anti-Semitic, is I had invited David Duke on to see in 2015, why is Trump so popular and why are extremists like David Duke backing him so much? And he wound up going, I thought he was going to go on anti-Muslim, anti-Latino, anti-immigrant. No, he went purely anti-Semitic rant for about an hour straight. And I called him anti-Semitic, bigoted, racist, idiot, et cetera, because you know my style, right? And so the New York Times said that I agreed with David Duke. I had David Duke on, and I agreed that he was not racist.
Actually, I do remember that. And yeah, an injustice was done against Cenk Uygur in that regard. I do not think that Cenk Uygur is pro-David Duke. And I do not think that Cenk Uygur is anti-Semitic either, or any of these things that they would accuse. He's not pro-David Duke, and he's not anti-Semitic. So that's just crazy talk. And I don't even respect or like Cenk Uygur, but when people speak of untruths against people, even people I may not like, that's bullshit. That's bullshit.
And people that watched the video, they were like, "What? No, guys, this is crazy. What? So are you guys trying to smear this guy on purpose? Because no one could watch that interview and think that I was supporting David. So then when you look back, so where did they get that anti-Muslim part? By the way, they threw an anti-Semitic too, because why not throw the kitchen sink at me so that Bernie gets smeared by association, right? So they got it from a rando joke from, I think, 11 years ago or something. And I stand by that joke 200%. And I included Muslims in that joke because I wanted to say, hey, look, I'm not making fun of other people's religion. I'm also including mine. And it was a joke about how God is he really going to pick based on a fashion show, right? Like Muslims dress in a certain way, Orthodox Jews dress in a certain way, and is God going to be like, well, I like the big Russian hat, I'm going to go with that brother, but the rest of you dress wrong, right? And they're like, oh. Like not a joke, not he's born Muslim. He is fully and has a long history of being anti-Muslim and anti-Semitic. Okay, so the New York Times, I know for a fact, is a bunch of liars, and they lie on.
Oh, and for the record, Cenk Uygur today is an atheist. He was raised Muslim, and he is an atheist in the same way a lot of former Christians become atheists. So I just want to clear that record up too, just in case some people didn't know. I think that maybe 99% chance everybody knew that, but just the same.
On purpose. So, or they're the world's worst journalists. And they're like, who cares if it's a joke? Who cares if he said the opposite? Who cares if he's Muslim? Our job is to smear outsiders like him, and most importantly, Bernie Sanders. So that's how those things come about. But the worst part of it, sorry, Briahna, one last thing. The worst part of it is that good people believe it. And how are they supposed to know? How are they supposed to know? If I read that New York Times piece when I ran for office, I would have voted against me. Because it painted me as a right-winger who hated all these groups that I love and fight for. And if you don't know the reality, of course you're going to not like me. So that gets into people's heads. So that's a small part of it. There are other parts too.
So I have the article in.
There are right-wing aspects of Cenk Uygur. He's anti-union for starters. He basically opposed the unionization of TYT. I do believe they have a union now in TYT. He needed to do that to save face. I just want to state that he was originally. Now I'm not going to go by. Well, Cenk Uygur said mean things about women because he couldn't get laid in college, that sort of thing, back in the 1990s, the thing that the Justice Democrats basically hung him over. I'm not going to go with that. People can change. But as a supposed progressive, he was not pro-union. He stated at one time that he was supportive of the death penalty. And of all people, Jimmy Dore changed his position on the death penalty. He realized that the death penalty was wrong through the persuasion of Jimmy Dore, the guy that he calls right wing these days. So
in front of me, and you're right. It's by Jennifer Medina, and she opens it. Can an endorsement be put back into the bottle? On Thursday, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont endorsed Cenk Uygur, a progressive talk show host running for a California congressional seat, who has a history of making offensive comments about women, Jews, Muslims, and other groups. So I want to ask you this question as a follow-up. Do you regret that Bernie endorsement? Do you think it caused more trouble than it was worth?
Well, yes and no. Yes, as in, if I thought it was going to hurt Bernie 1%, I wouldn't have wanted it under any circumstance. And you could argue that it did hurt him a little bit because it provided an opportunity, fairly or unfairly, to smear him one more time before Super Tuesday. So with the benefit of hindsight, knowing what happened, I would have never asked for it in the first place. And you know that that's true because the minute we ran into this trouble, I called Bernie and said, brother, you got to take it back. You got to do whatever you can to get the hell out of this because they're trying to smear you and your campaign is infinitely more important than mine.
Yeah, I do remember that really vividly. I want to come back to the uncommitted discussion for a little bit. So do you think that fundamentally there was not a single name that the community would have, the uncommitted organizers would have embraced? Do you think it was just any name was bad? Or is there a possibility that someone like, say, Rashida Tlaib, who obviously has deep ties in her own district, in her community in Michigan, where this whole thing seems to have started and be based, and could be, as the current rules are without the civil rights claim that you were making, president as is, qualifies in all the ways you got to qualify. Is there a world where you think that they would have accepted Rashida Tlaib's name on the ballot?
Yes. So, but she's the only one, or almost only. Okay. So, and let me explain why. So, one, you've got the smears that people accidentally believe. Number two, I had the problem of the fact that, I'm a naturalized citizen, and a lot of people thought, because there's no point there, right? So why bother voting for this guy that can't, that might not be eligible, right? But my point back to them was, yes, but I'm also positive that uncommitted, the word, is also not eligible to be president. So like you lose absolutely nothing by backing me. I could actually gain delegates and then use those delegates, unlike uncommitted, as leverage to try to end the bombing of Gaza.
How confident are you about that, by the way? How sure are you? Because this feels pretty untested. What information do you have about whether or not you actually were able to get those delegates and delegate them, as it were, at a convention?
Yeah. So if Joe Biden is the candidate and he never withdraws, and I was absolutely clear with all my supporters about this, then those delegates are worthless. He is going to have 98% of the delegates. The 2% aren't going to matter at all. But if Joe Biden withdraws from the primaries, as our client suggested in that podcast, and I think there's some percentage chance that he's going to do that, then the delegates become worth their weight in gold, because presumably the Newsoms and the Pritzkers and the Whitmers have to try to get as many delegates as possible, and they're competing with each other. Then you have that as a batch of delegates that is leverage that could be used to try to extract some sort of significant promise from them, like any of the Bobcat guys. So that was the idea. There's very good logic behind it. There's no question about that. So, and then but lastly, and most importantly out of all those factors, is that if the Democratic Party will end your career if you say mean things about their candidates, their incumbents, the people that are already in power. Or even if you support someone who says negative things about their candidate or their incumbent, then that is the third rail. So everyone who was both either a politician or a leader in any kind of group that has to deal with the Democratic Party then realizes, no, don't. That's third rail. Do not support anyone who criticizes Biden, because that'll be the end of it. And hence,
so let me ask you.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And hence, it became a situation where attaching a name to that uncommitted cause became untenable, honestly. And I'm sorry, I hate to say this, and I don't want to cause division. I'm just being honest with you guys, because the leadership did not want to risk angering Biden more. Now, I said the only exception would be Rashida Tlaib, because she's already among the elites. She's already has enough credibility as a United States representative that people would go, oh, okay, well, if it's Rashida, yes, 100%. Then we're willing to take that chance. And by the way, that would be the voters, and she has enough amplifier on her own right that if all she did was say it, a lot of the voters would have gone in that direction anyway. And I think that she has enough clout that she could have pulled at least half of the other leaders in that group to join her, and maybe all of them. But yeah.
The only thing Rashida Tlaib's got going for her is her symbolism as the American voice of the Palestinian movement. She's obviously Palestinian. And she's going to get a lot of heat for it by the right and by the centrists and all that. So in that regard, I can have some empathy for her. She was one of the brave voices that voted for the bill in U.S. House that would have actually solved for the better the rail workers situation. Unlike AOC, she did not go to vote and bust a strike. The problem with Rashida Tlaib is just like AOC and the rest of the squad, just like Bernie and just like Marianne Williamson and Cenk Uygur and Dean Phillips, they're all going to be riding with Biden in a few short months. That's the sad part about this whole thing.
Yeah, some of them would have been risking their careers.
I mean, so that's an incredible proposition that I think is going to cause the ears to prick up of a lot of people listening, because even outside of the horrors of Gaza, a lot of the left that has become disenchanted with members of the squad over the years have held Rashida Tlaib in high esteem. She has never been on the bad side of the worst of these votes. She sat out when others decided to vote to break the railroad strike. She doesn't seem to have been participating in the rotating villain around the Iron Dome and some of these other hard votes that progressives have intermittently taken bad votes on. She is the one that is, for lack of a better word, the most pure and unsullied among the squad. And so that, combined with her incredible advocacy around Gaza, I think she's a dream candidate of a lot of people, which raises some questions about, and I don't expect you to have, telepathic insight into what's going on with her, but like, given the kind of historic nature of this moment with Gaza and the dwindling opportunities that the left is being presented with, why not? What a missed opportunity. Why not?
Yeah. So look, first of all, let's be fair to Rashida. I never talked to her personally. And so I'm not saying she's one of these politicians who thought criticizing Biden was a bridge too far. I want to be super clear about that. I'm not saying that. I do know that there were other such politicians. Okay.
She also publicly made fun of Hillary Clinton once, and that made me also respect Rashida Tlaib. It was some forum where it was a Bernie Sanders forum back in 2019, and somebody mentioned Hillary Clinton's name, and some people started booing, and one of the hosts said, "Oh, we're not going to boo here. This is just." This is unprofessional. This is terrible. And Rashida Tlaib said, "No, we're going to go and boo at Hillary Clinton. So everybody, let's go boo." And I remember defending her on Facebook, and one of my friends got on my case. That was terrible on her part. No, that was good. Anytime you can go and slur against Hillary Clinton is always a plus, especially if you do it from the left where it needs to be.
And furthermore, we have no idea what's in Rashida's head and what she's heard about me. It's possible that she heard a crazy lie about me and thinks it's real. So to be fair to her, who knows in this crazy looking glass world of mainstream media where gaslighting is so industrialized that we're like all like the fish when they ask, how's the water? What water? So I don't know what's in her head, but I do know that she did return, the outreach that I had. And so again, that might be for what she thinks is perfectly legitimate reasons. Number two, I have no right for someone to get back to me, right? That's not a thing. If they're busy, they choose to do something else, no problem. That's not my business, that's their business. Okay. Now, having said that, yeah, as a human being who's personally affected by this and sees all the inner workings, it's hard not to get frustrated. I would get least frustrated with Rashida because she has been pure. It's not an act. She has been great on all those things, right? So, but at the same time, if I saw someone working this hard to help any cause that I believed in, I'd reach out. I mean, and Briahna, you know me, like I reach out to people sometimes to a fault, right? I bring people in, and then some people then turn around and do things against me. And
you didn't want to reach out to make Nancy Pelosi's speakership hostage like it should have been done by working with a large portion of not just the online left, but many activists, grassroots activists out there who thought it was a good idea. You wouldn't have any part of it, Cenk, because we must be united with Biden because Orange Man. I mean, you kind of just contradicted yourself.
I still don't get jaded. I still bring more people in, right? So, but not everybody thinks that way. But it's not about Rashida. It's about the ideas behind these movements, right? The principles and what drives people and what incentivizes people. And what is hard for the average person to see is the assumptions that the people in charge have and the incentives and disincentives they have. Because a lot of the top Democratic donors that fund those politicians also fund a lot of the groups. So if you dare to cross Democratic politicians, your money is in jeopardy and your organization is in jeopardy.
Right. But just to be clear, Jake, I wasn't asking, regardless of her relationship with you, what I'm asking about is whether or not she would be interested in running with Committed, And so I'm more curious about whether Committed reached out and was interested in that kind of a project rather than, because as you said, we can't mind read about your guys' relationship.
Rashida running for president?
Yes.
Yeah, my guess is that she would have thought it was too unrealistic and that could hurt her reputation.
Which is a shame. And I would love to get her on the show. Rashida, if you're listening to this, we'd love to talk to you about it because I know for a fact that the kind of support that other progressives have been struggling to recapture post-Bernie because of the disappointment with Bernie and people's unwillingness to open their wallets back up, I think you would be pleasantly surprised by the grassroots campaign that's eager to materialize at your feet if you ever show any interest there. But
Briahna, let me just say one quick thing about that.
Sure.
So you're absolutely right. There would be a groundswell for her that she does not anticipate. And that is why I tried so hard to get other progressives in this race before it seemed that almost no one would get in. And hence I got in to try to push Biden out. But you're right, because I know, like when you start out as an outsider like me, you start out with a giant obstacle to overcome. And so Rashida would not have had as large an obstacle. But in order to be fair to Rashida, you have to understand that she would have run into that third rail too. And they would have smeared the hell out of her. It wouldn't have just been as bad as it is today. They would have all started saying, wow, look at her thinking she can do this. What an arrogant person.
Of course, Cenk, but we all know that, right? And so this is a little bit of a difference that you and I have had for some time over some of these political issues. I think the left has to accept that obviously it's going to get smeared, no matter what it does. And therefore, I think that should frankly not be a part of the calculation, unless the left just wants to sit on its hands and be like, we're going to just exist and do it and live with whatever the neoliberals want. We could both shut down our shows and stop talking about it all. Because if we're going to say we're going to freak out if there's any resistance to us, well, then we might as well not try. There's going to be resistance. And this was
exactly. We need a left that's belligerent, loud, obnoxious, and not afraid to dish out the shit that's thrown at us. They're going to hate the left no matter what. My prediction is this: that if and very likely if Donald Trump wins in 2024, I'm repeating myself again, they're going to blame Jill Stein. They're going to blame Cornel West. They're going to even blame Robert F. Kennedy. They're going to go stupid and blame the Libertarian Party as if they could have potentially had their votes toward Biden. Then they're going to go and blame the activists for Palestine, and then they're going to bring back the old hits, and say, well, it was Bernie Sanders that really got this whole thing started, and those Bernie bros. And let's see what else. Tulsi Gabbard, all it. They're going to be blaming all these people, and then it'll be Russia, and that's where I see the writing on the wall on election night and beyond for probably the next 4 or 5 months, that the left will be blamed, and they're going to be blamed more than they have ever been blamed before. And the left, I will argue, is weaker now than it was when Bernie ran in 2016. We certainly are not where we need to be. We're back in the days where everybody was fighting on Tumblr.
I really don't want to go down this road. This is a little bit of the argument that was being made by some folks around Force to Vote, that the squad is going to be smeared. And I think some of us were saying, yes, obviously, and it's going to be on us to do what we can with independent media to protect them and rally around them and to push back. But this is a kind of a once in a generational moment where they have real leverage. Will they use it? And now similarly with Rashida Tlaib, it's like, okay, is this Uncommitted campaign demonstrating is the horrific nature of what everyone's seeing on their phones in Gaza enough to galvanize a real grassroots campaign around a candidate like Rashida Tlaib? And yes, the likelihood of her winning, almost nothing. But we seem to see already that the Uncommitted campaign has pressured Biden to, at very least, do a rhetorical shift and start saying he's in support of a ceasefire. It's obviously nothing, and it's rhetorical, and it's not enough, and it's bullshit. But it's a demonstration that they're listening and that there's leverage to be had. We see this weird rigmarole over this port that they're building off the coast of Gaza. Again, it's bullshit and it's nothing, but it's clear evidence that the Biden campaign is trying to come up with busy work to make it look like they're responsive to the significant slice of the electorate that is.
And how sad is it that that proposing a ceasefire is a radical, dangerously radical position? The definition of a ceasefire is nobody's killing each other. and the Biden administration think they're going all badass to give an empty gesture. Oh, hey, I think a ceasefire is a good idea. You know that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to ignore it, and then the administration is going to end up, sucking Netanyahu's cock once again.
Is saying we won't vote for you as long as you're the henchman to a genocide. So I did want to ask you this argument about. Oh, go ahead. You can respond.
Yeah, you're bringing up something really important, Briahna, and I need to be clear. No, we don't disagree. We don't disagree at all. The only part we disagree on is when and where, like tactics, not strategy. And I think I proved that pretty spectacularly by running myself. So do I believe that they should have the courage to defy the establishment? Of course. That's why I set up Justice Democrats. That's been the driving force behind Young Turks TYT the entire time. In our mission statement,
Cenk, the Justice Democrat is a failed experiment. Even Kyle Kalinske, the guy you end up firing because he appeared to Jimmy Dorish for your take, was one of the first people that said that the Justice Democrats were a failed project. You still believe in this fantasy that the Justice Democrats made a difference? I believed it for 5 minutes. But, Justice Democrats is a joke. Remember what they did to you. Remember, they cancel culture your ass, Cenk. They even cancel culture your ass. It's a failed experiment. There's no reason for you to keep defending the fucking Justice Democrats.
It has the phrase challenge the establishment. And when no one else would do it this time around, I did it knowing that I was going to get obliterated. Not just that I was going to lose, very, very likely. Obviously, I thought I had some narrow window to be able to execute something nearly miraculous, but I knew that I was going to get attacked and ridiculed and be treated with disdain. But I said, if I'm asking the candidates to do it, I've got to be able to do it myself and to take that kind of abuse. But in my experience, people that already have some degree of power, it is near impossible to convince them to sacrifice themselves. They just will not do it.
Isn't that the problem, Cenk? I mean, some of us, obviously you and Kyle did Justice Democrats together, and Kyle has come on the show and made this exact case as to why he wanted the squad members to stick their neck out and be willing to fail, saying exactly what you've just said, that the whole point of getting them elected in the first place was to have some folks in there that were willing to take a dive on principle. And AOC, of course, has been quoted a million times as saying, I'd rather be a one-term congressman than to not live up to my principles. I'm paraphrasing, but we all know the quote. Maybe we can splice it in again.
What the Bronx and Queens needs is Medicare for all. We can do it now. It takes political courage. Start bringing the ruckus on the Democratic Party. That is our job. It's great that everyone thinks these issues are important. We need to make them urgent. This country has only ever changed for the better by groups of people that were willing to put everything on the line for a better future. That's how we got the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement. That's how we got the labor movement, queer rights and marriage equality. It didn't happen by people playing it safe. We have to give it all we got.
Yeah, AOC, but what do you do now? You play it safe. You play it safe, and you lash out at protesters because they asked you to declare what's happening in Gaza as a genocide, and you and your boyfriend act like you're just above everybody else. You voted to bust a strike of railroad workers. You went and rightfully voted against the Iron Dome, but then Nancy Pelosi pecked at you like she's a fifth grade teacher pecking at a child, and you went crying and voted abstain. You are the biggest massive disappointment I have ever seen in my life, politically speaking. I can't remember the last time maybe when you were protesting at Nancy Pelosi's office might have been the last time I was like cheering you on. I don't know. It's just, you've just been one huge disappointment after the other. I do not know why. Well, I kind of do know why people pay so much attention to you. And that's probably the dumbest reason to do so, being an attractive woman, which you are objectively. But just like Tulsi Gabbard, you disappoint and she disappoints. You're both two peas in a pod, by the way. I hope that you're listening and me saying that, and I hope it resonates deep down.
People realize that the most powerful position you can be in is when you are not materially attached to a position of power. If you're a one-term Congress member, so what? You can make 10 years worth of change in one term. If you're
I believe that when I had Jen Perlman on the show, who's now making a second attempt to challenge Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I believe she said that her plan was to be a one-term member of Congress. I don't know if it was on my show or was on another show, but I think that was what she was proposing. And if she's listening and I'm wrong, she's free to correct me, and I'll be glad to say, hey, I stand corrected. But AOC, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. And same applies to most of the squad. Rashida Tlaib occasionally shows an independent streak, but there's nothing even remotely independent about you, AOC. You're now just another Democrat. You became Joe Crowley, the man that you defeated in 2018. You became Joe Crowley.
You're not afraid. Democratic Party does not do more unless it is pushed. So we need to push them. And they don't like it. I think I annoy them, but but that is our job. That's our job.
So that is what is so frustrating, I think. Not that there's a failure to acknowledge the risks that they face, but as I'm sure you understand, the people who listen to this show and other shows like yours and who were sending $7 checks or $27 checks to the Bernie Sanders campaign, many of them did not have that much money to spare, but were willing to do it because they said, here's a fighter who's willing to sacrifice it all for me. I'll sacrifice it for him. He's going to sacrifice it for me. Yeah. And so then when you have people who can barely make rent sending you checks, boosting your campaign, knocking doors for you, and you're sitting there unwilling to let go of $175,000 a year salary, when you also have 1,000,001 opportunities that frankly are better paid if you were to leave Congress at this point, if you're an AOC or a member of the squad, when you're able to access book deals, or you could sit as a co-host of The View, or you could join the Center of American Progress, or whatever venal opportunities Democrats offer you once you leave Congress. The argument that, oh my gosh, I could lose my seat, it starts to fall on deaf ear.
That is correct. And here's the thing. AOC could have gone into Congress and been a real rebel rouser. They would have probably tried to do a gerrymandering in New York in the districts. And, AOC, I don't know what the ballot access is. I think the Green Party's always on the ballot. She could go on a Green Party ballot, and I bet you she would have probably been able to get elected into Congress in the 2020. She got elected in 2018 or 2022 and still been a fighter. If she would have been a one-term Congresswoman fighting, she could easily, being a social media personality, get her own show. She would have done that. Jimmy Dore, or the Combo Couch, or Nico House, or the Gray Zone, or whomever, Glenn Greenwald. They wouldn't be criticizing her the way that they be criticizing her. Hell, even AOC even lost Kyle Kalinske. Because he will criticize. I will give Kyle some credit. He does criticize AOC a hell of a lot more than David Pakman or Cenk Uygur or Sam Cedar or whomever. So anyway, Bosch, you name it. So
yeah, go ahead.
No, Briahna, I'm just telling you the reality. I totally agree with you. I think that it's unacceptable that they're not. I think that they've actually done things worse than what you're saying. So let me explain the difference in the tactics where we had. I don't want, without fully getting into it, just real quickly. I thought that putting all of our leverage in the speaker vote was so premature, and that it was not the right tactic. But
oh my God, you still think it was right to reject force the vote, Cenk? Where is our fucking Medicare for all, or our public option? Not that I favor a public option, but Joe Biden is just basically just told his supporters that supported Medicare for all and a public option, hey, I'm not going to do force vote or Medicare for all. Well, fuck you. You could just lump it and just take it, or you'll have Orange Man to deal with. That's basically what happened. I can't believe that there are people out there that they still reject forced to vote and think it was the right thing to do. Where is our fucking public medical system, Cenk? Where is it? Okay, we have a pandemic. It was a great way not to just, to put, the left on the spot, put Nancy Pelosi on the spot, put the corporate Democrats on the spot. I would have even argued that you could have put some Republicans on the spot and see where they're standing when there is a pandemic and they're rejecting Medicare for all. Great Britain got bombed to death from the Germans. They managed to have a national health service that came into being in the year 1948. And you're proud that we didn't do forced to vote? I heard AOC being proud, even though she was looking at Kevin McCarthy being defeated by Matt Gaetz and company, who used the tactic of forced to vote. And shitty Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema also used forced to vote to get what they want. But for some reason, the left want to go tie their hands and be like, well, it's off limits. I ain't doing forced to vote. It's because that Jimmy Dore is for forced to vote, which was a DSA idea. It wasn't a Jimmy Dore plan. It was not a Jimmy Dore plan.
But when it came to later things where their vote mattered the most on Build Back Better, and especially on the Inflation Reduction Act, where they had enough of a voting block that they could have made all the difference. And that is when they should have built up their power and leverage and used it. And I was tearing my hair out on Young Turks. You got to use your power. This, like, if you had it, in my opinion, they had a perfectly good reason not to do the speaker thing. It was too big of an ask for too little in return.
No, it wasn't. We may have gotten Medicare for all. We may not have. Nancy Pelosi would have given the squad something. They would have been like, well, it's too premature to go for forced to vote, for Medicare for all, but maybe we could do a public option, or maybe we could go and use $100 billion to cancel medical debt, or maybe we could do prescription drug reform. She would have offered some kind of concession, and they did not do it. And you know what happened? The right wing of the Democratic Party, the centrists, the corporatists in the Democratic Party, the Clintonistas that control the Democratic Party, knew that they could sit there and slap around the squad like the abusive husband against their wife, submissive wife. And that's basically what happened, Cenk. And you sit there and you say that you sit there and you think that the forced vote was a bad idea. Wow, I'm lost for words.
But if you don't use it when the whole enchilada is on the line, okay, that just means you didn't have the courage to use it, and you're never going to use it. And then this whole enterprise was a mistake. And so and now not only did they not use it then when it was critical, but since then, other than Rashida fighting valiantly on Gaza, and to be fair, the rest of the squad supporting her on Gaza. So I appreciate them for that. I appreciate them for a couple of other things.
To varying degrees. I mean, I do wonder what you make of AOC not sitting with them and wearing a keffiyeh and holding those signs up at the State of the Union.
Yeah, to some degree, etc. But what I was getting to, Briahna, is, but overall, no, I've kind of given up on them. But
no, you haven't. You have not.
But Cenk, so I hear you, right? Like, and everything in hindsight is 2020. But let's play this out a little bit, because obviously we're years later. We've seen the Republicans do this exercise this identical plan and do it over the speaker vote, and to do it multiple times, right? The second time actually ousting the speaker. The argument that it's about what the ask was feels a little frustrating, I think, to some of us, because me personally, I love the idea of Medicare for all being part of the ask. And I certainly am not going to deny that I'm very committed and was very committed to Medicare for all being part of the ask, precisely because we were in the middle of a global pandemic. There was no vaccine out. People were dying. People were terrified. 15 million people had just lost their health insurance, right? And it felt like a prime moment to be foregrounding Medicare for all at a time where Bernie had just lost. And it kind of felt like we weren't going to be able to have this conversation again, perhaps for a generation. And that feels kind of like where we are right now, because certainly nobody's talking about it.
No,
so
Briahna, but you're flipping it.
Wait, let me just finish this.
Right.
Cenk. So I will admit, I'm not trying to run away from my desire for Medicare for all to be part of the ask. But at no point, and I can't speak for anybody but myself, but at no point was, to me, the ask limited in those ways. So I'm not a Hill expert. I don't know exactly what's in the province of what Nancy Pelosi can provide in her capacity as a speaker versus the kind of thing that will require broader congressional buy-in. But I do look to others like David Sirota for advice. And when I was writing the piece for Current Affairs, making the case for force the vote, and David Sirota reached out to me, we were kind of talking about it because he was a little bit on the other side of the issue, but we talked about it. And he was writing a competing article at the time for, I forget, The Nation maybe. And I said, well, let me just link to yours because I think all of your asks, his argument was that the asks were too small or wrong. I said, I love your asks. I'm going to link to your article and incorporate them into mine because I think we should ask for the moon and the stars because they have real leverage here. Let's talk about it. I don't care what it is, but something should be demanded, right? Because I hear your point that save your political capital for later, but it's not as though they're going to oust them between January force the vote and March or whenever it was that they first voted on the American Rescue Plan, right? There was no risk at them not being able to have another bite of the apple. And if anything, you can make the argument that having proved their willingness to pull the trigger in January, they would be taken more seriously over the fight over taking 15 out of the American Rescue Plan or whatever it was that you wanted them to fight for. So I wonder what you say to that.
Yeah. So you said you're not a Hill expert. Unfortunately, I am a little bit. And here's what I mean by that. I've talked to a lot of these Congress people behind the scenes many, many times.
If you were a Hills expert, you would have supported force the vote.
And the number one disconnect between us on the outside and them on the inside is the culture. And you cannot underestimate this or understate it. Once they get into Washington, they are surrounded by everything in the world is gaslighting. And they are told that if you are against your Democratic colleagues, you are a moron, you know nothing, you're embarrassing.
I don't doubt that.
As much disdain as I have for the Republicans, you know, Rand Paul today, Thomas Massey in the U.S. House of Representatives, occasionally Matt Gaetz, and I have some ideological problems with these people. Maybe Thomas Massey might be the good cop of all the people I mentioned. Ron Paul back in the day stood against the Republican Party when the Republican Party were proposing bullshit. Talking about the wars, talking about surveillance state, talking about funding for Saudi Arabia, whereby the United States were overseeing a genocide, that sort of thing. You know, when it came to these issues, aspects of the drug war, they're willing to stand against the party establishment. Why the fuck must the left wing of the Democratic Party just be the little foot soldiers for the Democratic establishment? That's ridiculous. This is why Dennis Kucinich has to run as an independent this year to try to get back into Congress. We don't know what's going to happen. Probably, likely not, but I hope he wins. But because he refused to sit there and buckle under the party, they went and redistricted him out of his district 12 years ago. So, spare me the crocodile tears about what these members of Congress have to go through with $175,000 a year salary and great health care and all that shit that they get and the free perks of being members of Congress and all that. Spare me the bullshit, the crocodile tears that these people, what they're going through.
Okay, hold on. So, and all those things. And then I try to tell them, no, guys, you're getting gaslit. And there's an excellent example of that. And that's related to this story. So when you guys were asking for Medicare for all, I knew at that point, based on what I was hearing, that Medicare for all wasn't ever going to be proposed under any Biden administration ever. So asking that in the context of DC would have made you.
You forced them to do that, Cenk. This is why it's called force the vote. You forced them. You don't make these politicians out there forget about this. You make the politicians answer to all of us, not the insurance companies, not big pharma. You need to go and do everything you can to take your case to the American people, to vilify big pharma, to vilify the insurance companies. And just in case there are Americans out there that think that the private insurance and big pharma are folksy institutions looking out for our best interests. And there's some stupid ass people that do believe that, by the way. You go out there and you fight for these issues. And if it irritates the Democrat establishment, and if it irritates the Republicans, even fucking more based. I have to go and hear all the stupidity that the Republicans afford and they're trying to push, and many corporate Democrats too. So you need to go and bring these subjects. And, you know, like AOC said a couple of years ago on the Jimmy Dore show, make them feel uncomfortable.
Made you look crazy. Now, you're not crazy. You're not at all crazy. We should be going towards there. But that's how it would have been perceived. So they viewed it as like,
what's crazy about it? I mean, I understand. I get what you're saying, that the establishment and the Overton window is so far to the right that you should call for Medicare for all. Oh, well, a few short years ago, prior to Bernie running, when you called for Medicare for all, they acted like you were crazy. It's nothing wrong with being for Medicare for all. It's something wrong with the Overton window where you think that a society that guarantees medical attention as a relatively free service to every man, woman, and child in this country, you know, that's somehow a crazy idea. It's not a crazy idea. It's normal. It's what normal, free, even Western democracies do. That somehow it's just out of the argument. You can't, it's the third rail of American politics, you know, that the Reagan administration, the Reagan Revolution was so cemented and ingrained in the cultural political psyche in this ridiculous country that supporting something as basic as Medicare for all is considered crazy. Well, here's the thing. You got to go and redefine what crazy means. You got to redefine what crazy means.
Like, oh my God, these guys have lost their mind. Whereas if you ask for $15 minimum wage, what I was getting back at that time from them was, Cenk, you're crazy because that's already passed. We're positive. Nancy Pelosi gave us a rock solid promise that it's going to pass the Senate. And I told them, guys, it's not. You're naive. And then they got super mad at me because I was trying to do something that was doable. You could actually do $15 minimum wage if that's where you did your stand. But you have to take a stand at some point. You can't take it at every point, but you have to take it at some point.
Why are they not fighting to bring back the $15 an hour, which $15 an hour is actually too low now? But why are they not trying to fight for that again? I don't ever hear anybody talking about $15 an hour. It really should be about $25 an hour, but I digress.
And you could have taken it on $15 minimum wage. You could have taken it on Build Back Better. You could have taken it on Inflation Reduction Act. And we could debate till the cows come home when was the right time and the right way to ask that. But we know the main thing that you and I agree on is they never made the ask. So
right.
That means
and Cenk, I
it was a failure.
Cenk, many of us predicted this, right? Some of us didn't require hindsight. Some of us saw the writing on the wall. And so I want to correct a couple of things. One, the ask wasn't for Medicare for all. No one was laboring under the delusion that they were going to take a vote and it was going to successfully return a majority for Medicare for all. Joe Biden, by the way, had already said that he would veto a Medicare for all bill if it had passed the House and the Senate. And there's no reason to disbelieve him when he tells the truth. Since he has lying Biden, but he usually lies in the more venal conservative direction, not a progressive one, right? So the question was whether or not we should have a certain kind of a political conversation by having a vote, having the ability to have a hearing on Medicare for all. That was the ask, to have a hearing for Medicare for all, the likes of which hadn't happened for, I think, 2 years. And even then, it wasn't technically a hearing on Medicare for all. It was phrased to have a more limited scope. And it was only the odd progressive here and there that were pushing Medicare for all as a more specific issue. So that was the question, just to use your opportunity to have a national conversation in the middle of a pandemic about Medicare for all. I appreciate if you don't think that's a particularly large goal or worthwhile goal, but it is a goal that many of us were deeply committed to and did think was worthwhile, in addition to any number of other goals, including getting Richie Neal off the Ways and Means Committee, getting rid of PAYGO, any number of other things, including getting up-down bills, voting on clean bills, which is something that the conservatives, the Freedom Caucus, managed to get out of their negotiations with Kevin McCarthy, and a bunch of other kind of procedural reforms that I think are frankly more democratic. But then I want to follow up on something that you said. Many of us had suspicions that the kind of strict, the kind of forceful pushback that came from some parts of left media over this, like, we're having a very reasonable conversation. People can agree to disagree, and this is fine. But as you remember, I'm sure it got very intense. And it seemed to be from some of us who had less access to talking to squad members, and seemed to be, for me, I just started this podcast. I was very attenuated from any of that. And Sam Cedar alluded to this when he was on Bad Faith back in the day, that it almost seemed like, because of conversations you had with them, where they had said they were under these pressures that you described from the rest of the Democrats, they had asked you to turn the temperature down, and that you were responding to some specific conversation. So can you clarify, were you ever asked to force the vote?
100% no way. Because look, honestly, we're taking ourselves too seriously. Once they get inside the walls, they forget about us completely. Like I was barely hanging on to conversations. Like they didn't care enough to ask me to help to turn down the temperature.
Okay, Cenk might be correct about that. That they're not paying attention to independent media anymore. The very people that got him in there in the first place, and he might be correct. That might have been the most correct thing he said so far today. But you got to go and put the pressure on these people. Even Bosch, who I can't stand, while he was urging for people to go riding with Biden in 2020, he says that we should go in there and worry the fuck out of Biden until he capitulates. Well, once Biden was in there, and honestly, Bosch is worse. He's actually arguing for the left to be submissive to the mainstream liberals, and urging for the liberals to just sit there and smack the left around and pressure them to support them, and not have it so where the liberals have to be accountable to the left. But anyhow.
Sure. And I'll tell you exactly what happened. If we had left it at, hey guys, I think that tactic is a little misplaced right now because your ask is too large and you're asking at the wrong time without building up leverage, etc. And me, I thought that, Sirota thought that, I think Ryan Grimm thought that. If we left it there, beautiful. Who cares? We're all honest actors trying to get to the right answer, and we disagreed about a tactic. But you know what happened next? Then a certain person called all of us not only liars and not only like deceptive, but that we were secretly working with Nancy Pelosi and the CIA. So it became personal. It became toxic. And then people said, "Well, why don't you work with a guy who's a lunatic and thinks that you're taking money from the CIA?"
On the squad. It was Jimmy Dore's attack on the squad that got a lot of pushback, which I didn't understand. Because what you're describing, Cenk, I think
and I can
really
explain
legitimate.
exactly why too.
But let me pinpoint this into a question so we don't kind of spiral out a little bit. I completely appreciate personal attacks were made, and that's all around, and that's not appropriate. I don't have any interest in retreading that. But specifically, like at the time, I remember thinking, well, I don't know. Maybe the squad is right. Maybe they have a different kind of, they're saving political capital for something that I don't understand. And let's let it play out a little bit before I completely say fraud squad, they're useless. Now, I think in retrospect, fraud squad was an apt. I mean, I don't, I have a different kind of a vibe, but I think it's a pretty apt descriptor. And what you were describing just then, Cenk, when you were saying, they're under all these pressures. They're told by their Democratic Party cohort that if they betray Nancy Pelosi, if they betray the party, that they're worse than scum. They're the bottom of the barrel. They'll never have friends in Congress again. I believe that. And I believe what you are saying when you describe that. But I think there's a difference of opinion on what to take away from that. And I think, we'll call it my side of the left, says your job, I know it was hard, but you were sent there by people like you and Justice Democrat, by you, Cenk, and Kyle, and the Justice Democrat. You were sent there to do exactly that hard work. And if you weren't up for it, I'm not behind you anymore.
Yeah, but Briahna, and that's where I am. But Briahna, you got to know when to play that card. If you play it immediately, then you asked for something unreasonable and you lost your leverage with them. And you should. And I
how do you lose your leverage?
Hold on, Briahna. Okay. Hold on. Remember, I'm on. Not only am I on your side, I'm the guy who created the group. That's
what was so confusing. That's what was so frustrating, I think.
Yeah. So I'm the driving force behind challenge the establishment. We didn't send you to have a tea party with them.
No. So I remember this like it was yesterday. And some people think I talk too much about Force of Vote. After Force of Vote was rejected, you, Cenk, and Anna were critical of these Medicare for All marches out there. Well, how dare they do this? It's not going to get anything done. I mean, and you basically just thought that working behind the scenes was going to get things done. You know what? If that's what you think, that's what you think. A lot of us realize this. We always have to sit there and take a back seat as the left. We have to take the back seat all the time. Not this time. This time is not now to go and to challenge the establishment. We got to go and vote for some piece of shit Democrat, because if Donald Trump is elected, we're going to have fascism. That sort of thing. And we've been having a whole lot of fascism in this country for a long time. At 55 miles an hour, Cenk. So and then you accuse people who wanted to go and change things as being like crypto secret Republicans or what have you, because they believe that the two-party system is shit. which the two-party system is shit. What do we get out of a two-party system? We had two right-wing parties since the days of Ronald Reagan. We had the Republican Party that's gone so far to the right that Ronald Reagan might actually come back to the Democrats if he was still alive. And you got a Republican Party that's flirting with fascism. Not every Republican's a fascist, by the way. And then you have the Democratic Party, who's basically moderate Republicans from the year 1985. And that's all the choices we have. You know, and if somebody talks about, you know, Green Party or some other independent progressive campaign, oh, that's just helping the Republicans while enabling the Democrats with our votes and they go and get further and further to the right. I've seen it happen. And although it doesn't look like it, that's exactly what's happening. We're still living not just in Joe Biden is not just the 11th term of the Reagan presidency. We're also experiencing the Bill Clinton presidency, part 3. He had the original from 1993 to 2001, January to January. Then you had January 2019 to January 2017. You had part 2 of the Bill Clinton presidency. And in January 2021, we had part 3 of the Bill Clinton presidency. And the president this time playing Bill Clinton is Joe Biden. He's playing Bill Clinton and Ronald Reagan at the same time. So this is let's see. You can call it the 5th term of the Clinton presidency or the 11th term of the Reagan presidency combined.
And the thing I get most frustrated by is you were supposed to open the door behind you. So when they started hesitating out of the gate about endorsing primaries against incumbents, I remember thinking, uh-oh, we got a significant problem here. Because this was supposed to be a movement. This wasn't supposed to be an ego exercise for a couple of people. Because if you get comfortable, then it was just about your ego. Your job was to open the door. So, sister, there's no one on planet Earth that agrees more with that because I'm the one who came up with that plan. So the debate we were having is, when do you put them to the test?
So let's talk about that.
Do it, and so then you get them back into tactics. Hey, I think it was right to do it in the beginning. It was right to ask for maximum. Oh, it wasn't maximum. Whatever. Those are tactical decisions. But for me, when it became the tipping point and absolutely clear that they were never going to head in the right direction, was when Pramila Jayapal did the Trust Biden campaign. And that was, It was literally called that. And you could watch me bringing Ro Khanna on and ripping into him on the air.
But Ro, you didn't, but you got it. Look, let's just do one thing at a time. You guys said that you would not vote in the House until the Senate passed Build Back Better. You're now saying, no, we withdraw our position. You have to say that's true, because it is true, right?
Well, there was a disagreement. There were different opinions. Certainly, our chair, Pramila Jayapal, said initially, I don't know how she framed it, that we want some ironclad.
I can read a New York Times quote for you. Progressive Democrats warned the House leadership that a majority of their members will withhold their support for a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill until the Senate passes a second, far larger package containing their spending priorities. That's a fact. So
the challenge is if we really were to hold to that, you'd have nothing. I mean, you really would then. The president's agenda would not happen, and we'd move on to the next issue.
But hold on, Representative Khanna, that's of course not true, right? So you wouldn't have it yet. Hold on, you wouldn't have it yet. And then what would happen next is pressure would then go back to Manchin and Sinema, and they would say, well, the progressives are holding the line, and they're doing the same exact thing that Manchin and Sinema are doing. Manchin and Sinema are drawing red lines all over you guys.
And Ro, I give him a lot of credit because he's the only one that actually withstands that and comes back and is honest about it.
Yeah, he's going to be on this week.
But I said, Ro, what are you guys doing? If you don't act right now, that means you're giving away all of your leverage. And this is your only chance. There is no tomorrow, right? And they couldn't find, I'm going to be honest, they couldn't find the courage to do it. And they were selfish. At that point, we're all in the same camp. And so I would argue back, Briahna, well, then weren't people wrong to call us CIA collaborators and make up lunatic conspiracy theories about us?
I'm not.
Well, maybe you're not a CIA collaborator, Cenk, but you know what? You go around and you chastise Jimmy Dore as some kind of fascist adjacent red-brown alliance type person too. Isn't that just as bad, you hypocrite?
I wasn't ever a part of any of that. I don't remember that, but I trust you. I'm not trying to invalidate your recollection of it, but I stay out of that. I don't do that. I stay out of that. But I want to get to this core point about this strategic argument, and then we can move away from this, because I know my audience is like, Jesus Christ, Briahna, even we are tired of talking for the vote at this point.
Yeah.
This question of losing your leverage. Fundamentally, I think a lot of us saw at the force the vote moment that absent some argument that AOC was going to be literally ejected from Congress, and that the squad members, not just to focus on her, but the squad members were going to be literally somehow between January and March, when the reconciliation bills were being voted on, was going to no longer exist. Then the possibility of losing your leverage is not there, because the leverage comes from what the margins in the House are. The leverage came from the fact that, just like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, Democrats literally could not pass anything either without them or without Republican complicity. And to me, that's a win-win. Either you get a bunch of Republicans on board voting for Nancy Pelosi, and then they have to defend that in their districts, or you get a bunch of, if it's on a given issue down the line with respect to the reconciliations, if you get a bunch of Republicans crossing the line to help Joe Biden, and then great, that's something that they can be attacked on later on. Or you actually get what you want, the way that Republican Freedom House caucus members were able to extract and are continuing to be able to extract meaningful concessions out of a Republican Party that, frankly, overwhelmingly does not agree with them. Most of the Republicans are establishment Republicans who love the same old things from the neocon era, but somehow this little group of misfits have managed to punch way outside their weight class. And all we're saying is, tactically, we think we're right, because the tactical considerations, the leverage could not actually have been torn away from the squad members, because the leverage lay in the distribution of the House. And what we knew was that was only gonna last 2 years. And we also knew that the only bites of the apple we were gonna have were these 2 reconciliation cuts. And so it was now or never. And that was our
but you were
tactical
wrong.
consideration.
But you were wrong. It wasn't now or never. But
it literally was. And even in retrospect,
Briahna,
I think they should have gone for it.
No, but you have.
Yes, it was now or never, Cenk. And look how inept this squad has been, and the people who are adjacent to the squad in the U.S. House of Representatives. Look at the Progressive Caucus. Look at the Progressive Caucus, which was founded by Bernie Sanders back in the 1990s. It's now a pile of shit today, because, they basically, even though they didn't endorse Chantel Brown, they basically welcomed her on board as Nina Turner was trying to win that congressional seats nomination. And of course, Nina Turner suffered the same fate as Bernie Sanders. And these people who are well-meaning in the Democratic Party on the left, they keep getting punched at, because the Democrats punch us left. The Republicans punch left by punching the Democrats. And instead of the Democrats punching back at the Republicans, they punch at their left. And then what is which is the squad. And then the squad, and the people who support the squad punches to their left, which, it would be where someone like a Jimmy Dore or Briahna Joy Gray or a Gray Zone or whatever occupies that space. So it's always the chain of command from Republicans all the way down to the squad is to go and punch left. And that's what is happening. And frankly, I'm tired of seeing the punch being always aimed at the left.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
You have to deal with objective reality. So look, I hope for the last time, for God's sake,
the audience can weigh in on whether they think what I described or you have described as objective reality.
Okay,
the objective reality is that those margins existed for 2 years, and now they're out of power, and they can't do squat, and they never tried, and now they never will, right?
Okay, the inability to discern tactics is maddening. Okay, so
that's an ad hominem attack, Cenk. So if you want to be critical of other people for attacking people's intellect or their reasoning skills or things like that, then I think that we should hold ourselves to the same standards. We disagree, and we're talking about our disagreement. You don't have to accuse me of having an inability, as frankly someone who's very well trained and having good analytical skills, of having being technically unable to assess the tactical situation here.
Okay,
right?
So let me try to address all these things as quickly as I can, because this is the most irrelevant debate of all time.
Well, I would love to move on.
But hold on. So let me explain my position, because again, you put out things that are okay.
So all I pointed out was that the margins in the House don't change, Cenk. That's the only thing I added to this conversation. The margins in the House don't change.
Okay,
do you disagree with that?
No, Briahna, can I just answer it for God's sake? So
Please.
number one, on the personal stuff, you said it just a minute ago that you didn't care that somebody was claiming we're a CIA operative, etc.
No, not that I didn't care.
You didn't care.
That I didn't do
but
it.
You didn't care. And in fact, you piled on.
But
You said you were wrong.
I'm not aware of
the
that.
lunatics were right. You said the lunatics were right.
I said,
so you want to get personal. I can get personal on it.
Cenk,
and now you're taking offense at the slightest thing I said because I disagree with your tactics.
I said
I'm not
that
supposed to take offense that a lunatic is saying I'm backed by the CIA when I'm the guy who set up the group to challenge the establishment. So you're allowed to take massive personal offense at the slightest thing that I just said. But I'm not allowed to take any offense at a massively lunatic position that you largely supported throughout. Okay.
How did she support that position, Cenk? Did you hear it coming out of her mouth?
So okay,
what I said was force the vote.
Put the personal stuff aside.
Cenk, what I said was that force the vote was right, and I said I was not aware of any accusation. I think people have an outside sense of what people are paying attention to. I don't know about any accusations of CIA. I've never heard that in my life.
Unhinged accusations. You didn't know that?
I gotta tell you, Cenk, that specific one I've never heard. I've heard him make fun of Ryan Grimm's toupee. I heard him make arguments in favor of force the vote. And if you jog my memory, there's probably some other personal attacks. Remember, you guys started to all go back and forth about who's the biggest sexist because of.
I don't believe that Ryan Grimm job has a toupee, but he needs to get a damn good hairstylist out there. He's in need of one.
Things that happened in the past, I stayed out of that. I don't care. And I think it's for both of your benefit that I didn't weigh in on any of that because there was some wrongdoing all around as far as I'm concerned. But that wasn't my concern, and it continues not to be my concern. I don't want to get into that dirty muck. I want to talk about the strategic considerations behind force the vote. That's it. So I think the strategy that was articulated by Jimmy Dore was right. The strategy, yes.
Yeah. Now get back to strategy versus tactics. You said, hey, their leverage is maximum in those 2 years, and the vote count is in those 2 years.
Yes.
That's what I told you. Of course I agree with that. After the 2 years is over, it's totally irrelevant. So the question we were discussing, Briahna, is when within those 2 years do you use it? And you guys said, use it right away, use it all. Now, what I know from Washington is, as much as it frustrates all of us, and it makes me want to tear my hair out because they wasted years of my life, I knew that if you ask for the maximum thing, they're going to think that you are not credible. And then once...
And waiting, hoping that they'll be nice to us after we ask pretty please, it's not exactly a winning strategy either. I have been accused of being an accelerationist. And I'm a reform kind of guy. I kind of am a reform kind of guy. But I want a reform that actually becomes reform where it actually betters people's lives. They're not even there. They're not even there trying. I mean, I don't care about window packaging. Oh, look, we got people who said these very base things and they're in Congress, and look how they do nothing. I mean, you look at AOC. She will sit there and tell you this bill sucks and this is terrible, and then she turns around and votes for it. And I have people who are decent people politically will criticize me when I go after AOC. And I didn't for many years. For many years, I figured, well, the squad are doing the best they can. I'm not happy with them all the time, but the realities. And I got to the point where I decided, no, they're not doing a damn thing. They're not doing a damn thing for us. And so we need to work outside. And not just electorally work outside like a third party, although that's what we kind of need to do. We also need to go and, we also need to go and fight for these things locally, the state legislature, this sort of thing, local governments to enact some of these measures. We need to do these things. And I would argue that even if you believe that maybe occasionally the Democrats might still be worth fighting for, instead of looking toward the squad as some kind of inspiration, if I have to say there's a Democratic Party movement that's actually doing base things, I would say the Democratic former Labor Party of Minnesota in their legislature might be the closest thing. With a 1-seat majority in the legislature, they weren't afraid to get shit done. There's no reason why the squad could not look to that as a model. If especially the left, if they want to work inside the Democratic Party, but they're not going to do that, and they're going to follow with what the rest of the Democratic Party is doing, and they're not going to see what even works inside the Democratic Party machine. So there is that as well. Now, that's not my necessarily endorsing the Democratic Party in Minnesota. I'm glad they're doing what they're doing. I just don't think that the Democratic Party is going to listen or watch or learn from the limited good work that's being done by the DFL in Minnesota.
Once they think you're not credible, and yes, that's super frustrating, guys. You think I'm not frustrated by it? Those guys that I helped to get elected telling me I'm not credible because I'm asking them to do their job. I know, but that's why you had to hold for a moment where it was important. So, for example, PAYGO. PAYGO would have been a perfectly good moment, even though it was early on. $15 minimum wage would have been a perfectly good movement. And you cannot wait past the Inflation Reduction Act because there's nothing past the Inflation Reduction Act. So our entire debate is between the Speaker vote and the Inflation Reduction Act vote. When because we agree on the strategy, when would have been the best time to use the tactic of drawing the line and saying, guys, this is what we sent you for. If you don't do this, then we're going to have issues. And the downside of going too early was, and going the way that Jimmy did, and I hate to bring it back to him, I never want to talk about him again. But unfortunately, he was the face of the movement at the time, and you have to be realistic about that. And he gave, and Briahna, if you don't think so, you're in a bubble. In the outside world,
not that I don't think so.
There were many people that supported forced to vote. Yeah, it's true. Jimmy Dore was like one of the main voices behind it. Briahna Joy Gray is another strong voice behind it. And when she was on TYT's The Conversation almost 2 years ago, she made it clear to Chris Hedges, Cornel West was in favor of this. Kyle Kalinske, Crystal Ball, RBN, Revolutionary Blackout Network, you name it. It was not just, Jimmy Dore supports force of vote. It's a lot of people that supported force of vote. So, many people that supported force of vote. Even Sam Cedar initially supported force of vote, but he hated Jimmy Dore more than he supported force of vote. And, and I don't want people to think I'm some Jimmy Dore simp or anything like that. I have some disagreements with Jimmy Dore, but yeah, I don't agree with anybody. Briahna Joy Gray, I don't agree with her on everything, but the Briahna Joy Grays of the world, the Jimmy Dores of the world have been largely more correct than wrong on these issues. And Cenk, you have been consistently more wrong than they have been. So, I know there's a saying that insanity is repeating the same shit over and over, expecting a different result. Stop doing that, Cenk. Become the Young Turks you and Anna used to be. That's what I got to say. I know that's too much to ask, but especially in hindsight of that $20 million endowment by I forgot the name of the person that Katzenberg. Yeah, that gave you the $20 million endowment. The Young Turks have been going centrist since then. And your rhetoric here is proof of that.
Oh, but Cenk, you made him the face of the movement.
No,
look,
Briahna,
you guys, okay, but I don't want to go down this road. But like, I just want to tell you, like, as
I gotta say one last thing.
Wait a minute.
Hold on. Let me finish.
Like, seriously, I want you to hear me just like as a human being. I remember I was very new to this media space. Bad Faith had existed for like 3 months or something like that. I am someone who had a lot of appreciation and respect for the institution you've been able to put together, for what Sam Cedar has been able to put together. I adored Michael Brooks and loved going on his show. He was the first leftist to ever have me on. I considered so many people who were on the other side of that issue to be friends and people I really cared for. And Vigeland, Nomi Kans, like these are people who were very early in my trajectory, moving from the law to the left. And I thought we could just chat. And there was this one event that Jimmy Dore hosted. He has the biggest live stream of us all. So of course, why wouldn't he host it? But Katie Halper spoke at it. Crystal Ball spoke at it. Cornel West spoke at it. Chris Hedges spoke at it. And I spoke at it, right? And we interviewed Medicare for All activists and people who had lost loved ones and people with various disabilities and people who were suffering from COVID and all sorts of things. And so, yeah, if you want to say it was like Jimmy Dore's because he hosted the live stream and because he was the biggest channel of us all, I mean, that's obviously true. He was so much, he continues to be so much bigger than me. But also in a world where you wanted to vet these issues, like I invited Sam Cedar on, we invited him on the show, and we had a conversation about it that I felt at the time was very constructive. And that could have been done with Crystal or anybody else who I think gave a really measured, impersonal, mature, responsible articulation of what the goals were. And I just am saying that, like, going forward, if an issue like this happens again, I hope you're able to reach out to me or Crystal, whoever it is that's on the side of a given issue, just have them on your show to talk it out. Because there was a lot of misinformation. Sam Cedar was still arguing that somehow the Republican could become Speaker of the House. There was a lot of arguments that were circulating at the time.
There was a lot of ignorance behind that because they were like, "Oh, if we don't vote for Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy would be Speaker of the House," which that was not the case. That was not the case, ever going to be the case. And I can't believe that there were people out there who are, you can argue they're probably more smarter than myself, don't realize that fact. I mean, this is basic political science 101 in that regard and everything. So, well, the thing about it is, Shank's not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree. He is the Fred Flintstone of BreadTube. So, we'll allow this to go on a little further, and then maybe a few more minutes, and then I will close with some final thoughts.
We're just wrong, and that we're just kind of misstatements of the position. And I think we could have had more of this kind of a conversation, civil and respectful and reasonable, and come to understand each other's positions a lot easier if we had just been willing to reach out to each other and talk before slinging around ad hominems. And I blame Jimmy as well for slinging around ad hominems.
No, it's not as well. That's what drives me crazy. So, Briahna, can you promise me in return that the next time an ally of yours is smeared as thoroughly by a deranged lunatic as we were, and almost everyone else that disagreed, had an honest disagreement about tactics? He also said Amy Goodman might be working for the CIA. So when you have a deranged lunatic on your...
Yeah, and you attack Aaron Matei as being an Assad apologist, and you being from the Middle East should know how politics work in that region when it comes to Syria and the crazy accusations that were made. You and Anna Kasparian made against Aaron Matei. Not fully realizing the political realities of Syria, of Assad, and the enemies of Assad, and how that whole thing worked out. And that's what started that whole big feud that took place a half a year later after Forced to Vote.
Your side, maybe you realize, hey, this guy's smearing everyone and turning allies into enemies.
I don't want to do this.
Hold on.
Your allies were telling me that I was dancing on the grave of my dead friend. Your allies were smearing me all over the place. But I just muted everybody and moved on. I didn't hold you responsible for anything else anybody else said. I muted everybody and moved on.
So, Briahna, I'm never going to concede that it was 50-50. I didn't say
it was 50-50.
No, but everything you say makes it sound like, oh, you and Jimmy were having a
I don't need to do that.
No,
I'm not qualifying it at all.
Okay.
Oh my goodness
and then
gracious.
Jimmy starts joking around about looking up my co-host's skirt and how cool it was and how funny it was. And all of a sudden, no one cares about sexual harassment. And every time we're supposed to be like, well, and then we get yelled at. What?
Thank God, Shank, you weren't the one wearing that new skirt.
You just accept that you guys work with CIA. Why don't you just accept that you should be sexually harassed and that the left loves it now? And then we're the bad guys for not accepting that? Massive insult.
I don't know who said that. I'm sorry if someone said that to you. I was not a part of that, so I can't do that. So the only thing I care about is to make the following point.
You're making an outrageous ask, Briahna, because if someone said to me, hey, for example, Jimmy said about AOC, we should go to her house and make her feel afraid. If I would, at the minute he said that, I was done with him forever and ever and ever.
Look, that's a difference of opinion.
That's not a difference of opinion. What that does is it makes our whole side toxic.
It's quite literally a difference of opinion.
It hurts our cause so much. How can you not see that it hurts our cause to have people associated with us that are radicals, that are like almost calling for violence?
They weren't, but he wasn't calling for violence, Shank. He was doing what Chris Hedges, who I presume, is he on the bad list as well? Chris Hedges talks about politics of fear. When people protest outside of elected officials' houses, of course, the argument that I would make, and I'm sure the argument that Jimmy Dore is making, is not that we should have machetes and try to chop them into pieces when they walk out the door. No,
thank God.
The argument is...
That's exactly correct. He's misstating what the objective goals was when Jimmy Dore talked about protesting outside of AOC's home and what have you. And look, in fairness, back in the days of Forced to Vote, that I think even back then Jimmy Dore was being a little bit harsh on AOC and Bernie Sanders and all that. With Bernie Sanders doesn't really come into the equation of Forced to Vote, but the House members were Forced to Vote. Do I think he was being, when he basically said she could fuck off and everything like that? I thought that might not have been helpful, but looking back in hindsight, that's okay. It was helpful. I mean, because they weren't going to go. They were there because they enjoy the limelight of being in the establishment. They became the establishment, and he saw the writing on the wall pretty damn early. I was still on, well, they were wrong on force the vote, but let's go and give them a chance. I was the good sport. I had this sort of good sport attitude about it. I was frustrated as hell that they didn't do force the vote. And I still think to this day, we missed probably one of the last chance we could ever get on having some kind of a universal healthcare system in this country. I mean, even, just the thought of it just makes me angry. This was an opportunity, and that we've had other opportunities to have it, and somehow we missed out on it. And I think that Briahna Joy Gray said it might be a generation before there's further talk about it. I have lost faith in the American experiment when it comes to this sort of thing. America's just not capable of doing what is right. They're only capable of harming their own Americans and harming people abroad. And because we live in a fucking oligarchy of corporate gangsters and religious nutcases and just people who believes in social Darwinism. That's basically what it comes down to. And these people, they have two wings. You have a fascist wing, and you have an authoritarian centrist shit-libby wing. So anyway, we'll continue.
Is that having a pressure campaign, the same way that Joe Biden, God bless, cannot go anywhere right now without being protested by pro-Palestine protesters, is causing him to be fearful about his reelection chances. That's 100% what should be done. And I give kudos up the wazoo to the protesters who are keeping that pressure on.
Me too.
So that's the argument. Again, I don't care about any of that. All I care about is the following: that the leverage that existed in January of 2021 would have existed, continued to exist in March of 2021. And as angry as people would have been with the squad over force the vote, absolutely nothing precluded them from withholding their vote again over a $15 minimum wage. But what we got instead was that they neither did it in January or March. So I just don't see how, in retrospect, you can be making that argument that somehow they were not going to be able to withhold their vote meaningfully over $15 minimum wage in March. There was no political capital to titrate down. The exact same political capital exists for the 2 years that the margins in the House were what they were, and they should have used it at every opportunity. That's the argument.
There's nothing wrong with that tactical disagreement. I really don't agree. But I think that what ended it for us completely, they weren't going to do it. Look, let's just be real. So 90% of it was decided by the fact that they got comfortable and they were never going to do it. But 10% of it was, once Jimmy started saying those things, it made the grassroots non-credible. So it gave...
Oh my God, it's going to blame Jimmy Dore. That's what Nomiki Konst and Emma Vigeland did on the Majority Report. They said, well, Jimmy Dore insisting on force of votes, a reason why it's going to be about 12 or 20 years before we get another chance to have Medicare for all. They're obviously not desiring Medicare for all. All they're going to do is blame Jimmy Dore, honestly, because it's always an excuse on why we can't pursue force of vote in any meaningful way when it comes to tactics. That we got to always vote for the lesser evil, or we got to be patient, or we got to go and vote harder in the ballot box. And that's probably the most frustrating one. Well, you can't get what you want. You're just going to have to vote harder. Just lump it and vote harder. And that's exactly what's been going on for decades. We don't have it. Oh, well, let's see. We have 100 Democrat senators and 435 Democrats in Congress, and we still can't get shit. Well, you're just going to have to vote harder. That's what it comes down to. And Republicans, they don't mind tackling on their leadership. I hate everything the Republicans stand for. I despise everything the Republicans stand for. I mean, I'm from North Carolina. I had to hang my head in shame that Jesse Helms was my senator for many years. And I'm going to have to hang my head in shame again if the fucking state of North Carolina vote for that crazy man, Mark Robertson, for governor. I'm going to have to hold my head in shame as a result. But here's the thing. The Republicans, they don't care. If they want to pursue something, they pursue it. And they don't give a damn. But there's always, the left has always got to be too careful about not wanting to step on people's toes. You want to know what was a good reason to challenge the corporate Democrats? and the powers that be. Look no further than in year 2018 when they basically embraced George W. Bush. And because George W. Bush said, well, there was Russian interfering in the elections in 2016, which that was not the case. But what happened? Oh, excuse me. What happened? What happened was essentially is this situation we're in, this conundrum that we're in as the left. In 2000, all these liberals hated Ralph Nader because, hey, he's the reason we got George W. Bush in power. Now, a lot of these people are embracing George W. Bush, and they're embracing Liz Cheney and all these motherfuckers, and they still have nothing but contempt for Ralph Nader, for Jill Stein, for Bernie Sanders, or just name it. Just they still hold that resentment. But yeah, George W. Bush, they say he's cool now. Ellen DeGeneres hanging out with him at baseball games. That's a higher priority and good vibes compared to the fact that we have, tens of millions of people without health insurance. This is where we're at. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to cut this short because I have some stuff I have to do this afternoon. But I wanted to talk about the show, the Bad Faith podcast with Briahna Joy Gray having another fight out again with Cenk Uygur. So anyway, let me go give my shout outs to all my friends here that I haven't mentioned by name. So let me go back to the beginning, and forgive me if I miss out on some of these names. Okay. All right. Okay. So we have let's see, we have here. Give me a second. Okay, we have Great Gripatine is here, PHX. Cisco is here. Dr. Nick Riviera is here. Earl is here. Let's see, scrolling down here to see who else we have here with us today on the show. And if I'm missing out on anybody, I do apologize. We have, all right, hold on a second here. I saw somebody else. Nikki, we got Nikki here. We have some animal murder and torture here. We have, I'm scrolling down here. See who else we have. Choosy Heretics, Chooses Carnation Revolution Now is here. So we have quite a few people here today, and I appreciate you all coming here. And for everybody that's actually subscribed to my channel all these years, I appreciate your support. I do. I appreciate your support and giving me a chance to sit here and run my mouth. So there was that, and I'm close to 800 subscribers on this channel. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Your subscription helps make independent media that much stronger. So, if you don't mind. So, if you like what you heard, please press like and comment. Comment any ways you disagree with what I have to say. We'll have a conversation. Feel free to share the content on this channel. As the First Amendment absolute, this is my duty to inform you to create your own platform and utilize it, because we're in fact the muckrakers of our time. Subscribe to the Willie Bragg Show here on YouTube and Twitch, and follow me on Twitter and Rumble and Facebook and all these places. I've got a new Facebook page I'm actually working on because I've been shadow banned. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Braglands, that's me and Jimmy, will be back. And our new schedule is Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So there is that. And I just also want to say to always reject corporate media. And I'll conclude by saying this to free Julian Assange, free Palestine, free healthcare for all, and free speech. Until next time, I will see y'all later. I got to eat. Bye-bye.